Hello YouTube, this is Dragonheart, the Prince of Wales, and welcome to a YouTube video on my channel. And this video will be a little bit different to what you probably expected and probably what you're used to on my channel as well. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I am probably one of the few, or one of the last people that predominantly uploads Total War videos that is doing a Total War Warhammer video, and that is because my knowledge of Warhammer isn't really, well, how can I put it? I don't know an awful lot about Warhammer. I'm not really used to the lore or the history of the game and of the characters involved, of the different races and so forth. Now, I'm a big fantasy fan. I am a big fan of things like Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth, Game of Thrones, Skyrim, The Witcher 3, all things like that I am a big fan of. But obviously with Warhammer, that takes different elements, certain elements from those kind of genres, like sort of elves and dwarves and stuff like that, and orcs, but it plays out in a much different way. Now, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Warhammer in this video. Not an awful lot, because like I said, I don't know much about Warhammer, but I do know quite a bit about fantasy, and I do know quite a lot about Total War, as you'd probably expect. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. In the background there will be some of the trailers that have been released so far and some of the footage that's been released so far. So obviously you've got something to watch while I talk, rather than just have me ramble on for 20 minutes or 10 minutes or however long this video will be. So first of all, we'll talk about Warhammer itself. It's a fantasy genre kind of tabletop game by Games Workshop. Now Total War obviously have the rights to create this game, which I think is great. If they do it right, then that gives me a lot of optimism going forward, because the last few years with Total War has been dreadful. We had the abysmal release of Rome 2 and the 17 patches, I think it's 17 patches for Rome 2, which isn't good enough. I don't care how much of a big kind of presence you are in the Total War community, you can't deny that the release was terrible by any game standards. If you take a game like, how can I put it, Skyrim, for example. If Skyrim had 17 patches, people wouldn't praise it like they do today. You take a game like Assassin's Creed, for example, that had one or two bugs. I'm on about Unity, by the way, Assassin's Creed Unity. That had one or two bugs, and everybody slated it. The whole no eyes, well, the eyes and the mouth, but the face was missing, all that sort of thing. Rome 2 was bashed. Don't get me wrong. I can remember back in the first couple of weeks of its release on the forum, somebody who was anonymous, but they were a game developer, or claimed to be a game developer, and they criticised it, but they didn't criticise it just out of spite. They actually put key points and stuff that should have been done, stuff that it wasn't done, blah 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 blah. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the game was slated, did poorly, and even though it's been patched, like I said, and quite a lot of people out there enjoy it, and I don't deny that. I mean, I suppose there are, depending on who you are, there are certain levels of the game that you can enjoy. I personally don't like Rome 2 that much. I would much rather play Rome 1, and that is because there's so much of a nostalgia feel playing Rome 1. I feel like my units actually have an impact when I'm playing. I don't quite get that feeling with Rome 2. I only have to sort of zoom in with a unit cam, or one of the kind of enhanced kind of graphical cameras, and even though the graphics are obviously upgraded, the game's had a facelift, blah 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 blah, you see units sort of slide around past each other, and they're doing kill move animations, and that sort of ruins it. I would much rather have the old system in place that was in Medieval 2, rather than have units slide around. I know it did it in Shogun 2, but at least with Shogun 2 you could kind of back it up and say, oh well, they fought sort of single combat with swords kind of thing, and it didn't look out of place so much in Shogun 2, but in Rome 2 it did. Now obviously these are things, as far as Warhammer is concerned, which need to be addressed. Cast your mind sort of a bit further forward then to Attila's release. Attila wasn't in a buggy mess when it was released, but I think the problem with Attila was that a lot of people felt sour about Rome 2's release, and it didn't give it the sort of investment that perhaps it deserves, because Attila's not a bad game necessarily, but it feels a lot like Rome 2, which is why I don't have I wouldn't say I have a negative opinion of Attila. I don't have a negative opinion of Attila, but I don't have as a positive opinion as perhaps other people or other YouTubers have of it, hence why I haven't played it for about 2 or 3 months. Attila, you know, it had lots of cool things upgraded, and it had things that were removed from Rome 2, which made its way back to the game, like family trees, for example. These were cool things. They added they added more depth to the game, something which Rome 2 didn't have, which was encouraging. They listened to the community, and they brought out a game which I thought was pretty good for the most part, like I said. But you know, with sort of Warhammer now going forward, I hope to God that they don't have bugs. I hope that it runs smoothly. I hope that the things which should be in the game, and I'm more about core mechanics like the gameplay and stuff, is there. I hope that they don't force kind of feed us DLC, because that's something which really drives me crazy. I mean, this week, well, if you're a subscriber of mine, you would have seen my Empire of Sands kind of, I suppose you could say analysis. It's more of an opinions video, which, you know, I said in that video, Empire of Sands, it just feels copy and paste again. You know, who wants to play as the 3 kind of desert faction units that are released? There'll be people out there that will want to play as them, but they could have already played as them with a mod. I mentioned in that video the mods that were in Rome 2. I played as Axum in Rome 2, you know, and then obviously Axum's now been released in Attila, but with Attila, you know, you could have played as them beforehand anyway, just with the mods. Now obviously with the modding, that's kind of restricted, because now if you want to play as a particular faction, for example, we'll say this is a faction, my finger right now, the finger faction, whatever that is, this is a non-playable faction. This mod enables you to play as that faction, but once this DLC is released, this becomes unplayable unless you want to pay for it. You see what I mean? And that's what's basically happening with Total War right now, which really drives me crazy. Back in the old days in Rome Total War, I know I'm going on about Rome Total War a little bit, but I feel like that is a good point of comparison for the entire series. Rome Total War, if you wanted to play as Germania, you had to play as the Romans first. You had to play as the House of the Julii, the Scipii or the Brutii. You had to complete a campaign with one of those factions to unlock other factions. You also had to conquer certain factions to play as them. So if you wanted to play as Egypt, you have to wipe out Egypt. And this was something which I really liked, because it added so much depth, because not only are you playing one full campaign with the Roman faction first of all, you're then playing a full campaign as Egypt, and then you're playing as Germania, and then you're playing as Britannia, so forth. You know what I mean? You end up playing 4, 5, 6 campaigns just until you got the whole factions released, which I thought was a fantastic thing, fantastic concept back then. You know, and that's something which was applied to other games as well. Other games had situations where you can't play as a certain character until you beat the game, and I think that's a fantastic kind of concept for video gaming in general, rather than kind of taking bits out. And I'm on about the Greek states now, and the Viking forefathers for Rome 2 and Attila. You know, with Rome 2, there are probably, I'd say, 50% of players who play Rome 2 would probably want to play as Sparta. Just going to put that out there. People want to play as Sparta. They might not know their history about sort of the Battle of Thermopylae. They've probably seen 300 though. You know, I'm all about the kind of casual fans. That's what that's what I'm aiming at right now. The casual fan probably would have wanted to have played as Sparta, so they obviously appealed into the casual fan base by releasing the Greek states. Now, the Greek states, they were a pre-order bonus. So if you pre-ordered Rome 2, you're set. You can play as Athens, you can play as Epirus, or you can play as Sparta. The thing is, because Sparta is such a well-known kind of faction from history, and a very popular kind of race that people want to sort of play as, having them behind a wall where you have to pay for them is obviously going to make them a lot of money. And the same sort of thing happened with Attila. You look at the Dark Ages. In the Dark Ages, what do you think of? You think of, kind of Britain, people warring, the decline of the Roman Empire and things like that. But you also think of the Vikings, don't you? You think of the Vikings invading, raiding the shoreline of Britain and the rest of Europe, and settlements, and settling down basically, and things like that. So obviously the Vikings, the Danes and those kind of factions being behind a paywall again is something which really sort of annoys me, and it's something which I hope doesn't happen in Warhammer, like it did in Attila, because that's just so frustrating. Now, with Warhammer, and we're going to get to the Warhammer part now, obviously, I just had to put that out there to give you a bit of backstory about my thoughts. with Warhammer, there are factions such as the Greenskins, the Vampire Counts, there's the Empire, there's Skaven, which are like the Rat Men. So I do know a little bit about it. I have watched one or two of Lord Rexasor's videos, and I definitely recommend, if you want to stop this video right now and find out a bit more about Warhammer lore, check out Lord Rexasor's channel. He has playlists on there going over Warhammer lore, so definitely do that. That's where I'm going to be doing near a release. I've watched one or two so far. I'm going to go and watch the rest near a release, so I got a good idea of what I'm getting myself into when the game's out. But with Warhammer, they've got dwarves, you've got elves, you've got the Skaven. Like I said, there are quite a few. I'd say there's not going to be as many factions as in the big kind of historical Total War games like Rome 2, but each faction is quite diverse, so they're not copy and paste, which is a very encouraging thing as far as a franchise or a new franchise in the Total War series goes. If they do this well, I have lots of encouragement for things going forward. Lots of people are talking about another Third Age, acquiring the rights to somehow do a Lord of the Rings or a Third Age Total War, which would be fantastic. Obviously, we've all played the mods. We've played the Third Age mod on Medieval 2. That was a fantastic mod, by the way. I mean, if you haven't played that, then where have you been? Where have you been, guys? Because that is a fantastic mod. It plays the Elves of Lorien, or things like that. It's just great, and the fact they've actually got like some of these creatures from Mordor on the like the orcs and stuff. Very hard to animate, so the work that went into that mod, it was fantastic. Having Balrogs and stuff like that, it's just insane. But if they can do this right now with Warhammer, because obviously we've got dragons, we've got sort of orcs and stuff like that in this game. If they can do it right, if they do it well, and if it has a pretty smooth release, then holy shit, they're going to release one of the best, if not the best, Total War, because it would have absolutely everything. You'd have your basic Total War kind of mechanics, placing sort of spearmen in the front line, for example, having a cavalry detachment hidden in the forestry behind you, having archers on top of a hill so they get better range. You'd have stuff like that, but obviously you've got a lot more going on. You've got mages, you've got sorcerers, you've got your kind of dragons, you've got your griffins, which you can use as a kind of cavalry or perhaps attack them from the sky. Obviously there's the floating units kind of thing, which I was curious about how would they incorporate flying units in this game. Well, like dragons and so forth. Well, they would probably hover above ground, and then obviously issue an attack order, or perhaps they will hover above ground and do their own thing until you issue an attack order. These are little things which obviously we won't know much about until we've actually played the game and it's been released. But if it's done well, I have a lot of hope going forward. I'm a massive Game of Thrones fan. For those of you that don't know, you should know by now if you're a subscriber. If not, where have you been? But if they could get the rights for that, like Telltale Games, for example, they acquired the rights for the Game of Thrones franchise, and they've done a Telltale Games Game of Thrones series, which has been fantastic to play as. And the fact that you've got sort of Jon Snow, Daenerys making cameo appearances, Ramsay Snow, stuff like that. It's great. They've actually got the voice actors and stuff, and it's a really good game if you're into sort of narrative based games. And I'd recommend that definitely. But obviously, with Game of Thrones, you've got the Game of Thrones HBO franchise. You've also got the A Song of Ice and Fire books. They've taken the actual TV franchise, and if they could do that with a Total War game, that'd be fantastic. Can you imagine having a Game of Thrones Total War, properly done with voice actors from the show? So, for example, if you want to play as House Bolton, for example, then you've actually got the actor who plays Roose Bolton as your kind of main general. And you've got like the flayed men on the field on their banners, and you've got Ramsay as like a special character, something like that. That'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? You've got Jon Snow at the wall, so you've got a narrative-based kind of campaign where you're trying to sort of fend off the White Walkers, for example. It's a Night's Watch campaign. There's lots of kind of ideas there for additional kind of smaller-based campaigns, similar to the Peninsula campaign in Napoleon. I know something like that would work pretty well, in my opinion, for a Game of Thrones. But obviously, this is a long way off now, and they'd have to acquire the rights. I think it'd be fantastic, though. I think strategy. The thing with Game of Thrones, as far as the TV series is concerned, there are lots of good battles in the lore and in the books, but you don't really see them. I think Total War would actually show them. Like, for example, Rob Stark. He is how can I put it? He is the embodiment of Alexander the Great as far as the show is concerned. Never lost a battle, a fierce young commander, who has sort of a skill well beyond his age. You know, he's out avenging his father, making a name for himself, and even surpassing his father in some ways. And that is basically Alexander the Great, isn't it? And that's what Robb Stark's doing. But you never see it in the show. You never see him fight. You know, and can you imagine having the Northern armies behind you, and you've got Robb Stark and Grey Wind there on the battlefield, and you've actually then got the kind of, you know, the traditional Total War setting up your battles thing. But you've also got some special units and creatures like direwolves. That would be fantastic. So as far as sort of that goes, if Warhammer is done correctly, if it has a good, smooth release, I can see this being a fantastic game and a fantastic addition to the franchise. I'm not, like I said at the start of the video, I'm not familiar with Warhammer. I'm starting to get a bit, quite familiar with it now. I know sort of Karl Franz, the Empire, and stuff like that. You know, the Greenskins, Goblins. One of the units I actually saw in it's the Battle of Blackfire Pass. Was like a Goblin suicide bomber, where you've got the traditional kind of aiming your kind of unit to hit your enemy, and it flings this goblin with like wings into the sky, and then you can control it and aim. Obviously you can hit your own men, but you can hit the enemy and it just explodes sort of into them. I thought that was really cool, and I'm looking forward to playing as them. As far as kind of factions go though, I mean, the Empire look pretty damn awesome, don't they? Those Griffins, I want to play as the Griffins. I'm saying that now. Demi-Griffs, Griffins, I'm going to play as them. I think that's what I'm going to do when the game's released. And of course with the release, it won't be this year, it'll probably be 2016. Just trying to remember what year it was then. 2016, which I think, I think the game's been in development for about 3 years at least, so it should be long enough. I was worried, when Attila came out, because it wasn't long after Rome 2, and that surprised me in a good way. Obviously, not as much as I hope, because I don't play Attila that much now, but it didn't have a release like Rome 2, so they obviously did something right, and they've learned from their mistakes, which is all you can ask for, really. If they learn from their mistakes, listen to positive kind of feedback, and also negative feedback and criticism, because that's the only way you're going to grow and develop as a company. Creative Assembly, I think, deep down, they're a good company. I don't criticize them. They're a good company. They do things correctly most of the time. They've done a few things wrong, which I won't mention, but they've done most of the time. They're pretty good. They're pretty, they've got their fingers on the pulse. They know what they're doing. They will listen to feedback, and I think they will hopefully do a good release of Warhammer. So yeah, I think that's probably going to wrap up this Warhammer thoughts and opinions videos. This is the chance now where you can let me know what your thoughts and opinions are of Total War Warhammer. Are you excited? Do you think that if it is a good release and is a success in the kind of fantasy strategy genre, do you think that could lead to more kind of titles being shipped out to Creative Assembly? For example, Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. Do you think that is a possibility? I mean, with Total War, there's only so much you can probably do. I mean, we've done sort of Empire, Napoleonic Wars, we've done Roman history, Dark Ages, we've done with Attila, we've done the sort of Shogun. I mean, obviously there'll be a cycle, they'll come back around, and perhaps in 10 years time I'll be sitting here talking about Shogun 3 and Medieval 3 and stuff like that. But for now, what do you think will be the next Total War game? Do you think it will be a fantasy title, or do you think it will be another historical title? Let me know in the comments below. I've been Dragonheart, the Prince of Wales. Thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.